What is going on, snooker fans? Welcome back to the channel. April is now just a couple of days away and we've officially entered that part of the snooker season where every match from now until the 5th of May will be at least 2 sessions long, starting next week in Manchester for the Tour Championship. And this video will be another preview, but unlike my other preview videos where I typically try and predict the opening round matches and try and predict how the draw will ultimately unfold, this time around, I will just be offering my thoughts on the tournament itself and having a look at who needs what, because this will be the last chance for these guys to pick up any kind of inspiration before the big one gets started in a few weeks' time. Now, 11 of the 12 players here know they are safe and secure inside the world's top 16 and will be guaranteed a Crucible seeding. The one outlier is Wu Yize, who is currently sitting in 22nd in the world rankings and knows he must reach the final to displace Jack Jones in 16th place. So he will probably be the biggest plot line to keep an eye on next week. As for the rest, well, they are guaranteed to be at the Crucible, so next week will just be about ironing out their game. Now, of course, for all 11 of them, the main goal will be to end the week with the title in their hands. But perhaps the biggest aim will be to either maintain the good form they are currently in, or for others, desperately trying to seek some kind of encouragement, some kind of spark to cling on to going into the Crucible. Players like Judd and Kyron will of course go into the Crucible high in confidence with 7 titles won between them this season, and even if they both lost their opening round matches 10-0, it is not going to make a jot of difference when it comes to their form going into the big one. However, you do have Judd, now just 8 centuries away from the magical 100 landmark, and he'll be looking to make maybe another 4 or 5 to really strengthen his position to reach that milestone at the Crucible. But it's also not beyond the realms of possibility that we see him achieve it at some point next week. Then you have the likes of Mark Selby and Neil Robertson, both of whom are the only other players this season to win multiple titles. And this will almost be a test run for Mark to get his teeth stuck into a multiple session match, because we know the longer a match goes on for, the harder this man becomes to beat. And Neil Robertson, well, his job for the season is done. He has avoided the possibility of failing to make it to the Crucible for a second year running, and now comfortably sits in 9th in the rankings and will just want to keep playing in this new ferrule of his that he's been sort of experimenting with over the past few weeks. Sean Murphy will have the monkey of possibly finding himself in the qualifiers off of his back now, as the Masters champion aims to end the season on a high. He did get resoundingly beaten 6-0 by Judd Trump at the Players' Championship, but I don't expect that to have done too much damage to him overall, as we know his game has been looking very sharp during this calendar year. Xiao Guidong and John Higgins have also enjoyed very strong seasons, the former of course coming completely out of the blue, whilst the Wizard has also finally won silverware. So all the names I've mentioned so far I think will be feeling very good about their game regardless of how next week pans out for them. But that does leave us with just a few players who could really do with like a spark to get them going next week. The matchup between Williams and Ding feels like a big one. Both did win titles in the first half of the season, but have since not really made any impact in any of the tournaments they've played in. Ding, of course, will be gearing up for another chance at landing a maiden world title, but you feel as though you need to see a marked improvement in his game to believe that that could happen this year. Williams, on the other hand, is impossible to predict. However, after complaining about his eyesight problems, he will be wearing contact lenses for the first time next week, and it will be interesting to see how much this helps him, as that could be a game changer if it does work out well. Barry Hawkins is an interesting one because he is one of just 3 men this week who are here without winning a single title, but he has reached finals in York and Berlin this season, so his game is clearly in pretty solid shape. The Hawk is another man who has enjoyed his previous experiences at the Crucible, so a confident Barry Hawkins going into Sheffield could present as a bit of a banana skin to, the favourites in the draw. And that leaves us with the remaining man who's not been mentioned yet in Si Shai Wei, who I also confidently predicted to get to the final of the Players' Championship, so of course he ended up losing first round. Now, as amazing as it is for Si to be guaranteed a Crucible seeding for the first time, he could definitely do with a result or two next week, because 2025 has been pretty bleak for him so far, as he has suffered a string of early exits. And that will not be an easy task when he is confronted with a best of 19 opening round match against Mark Selby. Now, I have said that 11 of these men are sitting pretty in the top 16, but results next week could have a very big impact on how they are seeded in the World Championship, which in turn can affect where they sit in the draw. And even though that might not be something they are acutely aware of, it is definitely something for the audience to keep track of next week. Shaun Murphy, for example, will be very happy to secure a Crucible seeding after spending most of the season with that in doubt. But he is currently set to be seeded 15th at the Crucible, which has him on a collision course to meet Judd Trump in the second round. And we know his recent record against Judd is not great. Neil Robertson may also want to get himself out of a quarter involving the likes of Kyle Wilson and Mark Allen. But all of these positions will likely move around multiple times, and it's also important not to read too much into the provisional draw, as you could worry about facing a particular opponent in round 2 and then lose to a qualifier in round 1. Now for the tournament itself, just like a year ago, it is a 12-man event rather than 8, and I will again voice my opinion that this was a terrible, terrible idea to introduce, as it always made far more sense to me just to have this as a straight knockout tournament from the quarterfinals onwards. But the powers that be disagree, and I suppose the bonus for us as fans is that we do have more matches to enjoy. But when looking at the draw, it is effectively the Players' Championship Part 2, because the seedings have not changed at all. All 4 last 16 matches are the exact same from the Players' Championship, and the winner of those will face the exact same opponent in the quarterfinals. Now, I have a couple of times expressed my view that having all 3 Players' events happening back to back to back at the end of the season was a mistake, and this does highlight that by having them all happen without any tournaments in between, you are setting yourself up for having the same matchups happen because there's not enough time for the seedings to change. But of course, this time it is best of 19s instead of best of 11s, so it remains to be seen whether this format impacts how this event will play out. Or shall we just skip to next Sunday and see Judd and Kyron play out the final once again? Jack Jones could potentially be in for an uncomfortable week next week, but it will be some performance from Wu Yiza to get himself into the final, as even if he beats Xiao Guodong in the first round, he'll then have to beat the likes of John Higgins and then either Trump, Hawkins or Murphy to reach the final, which is an incredibly tough ask, especially over multiple sets of matches. Neil Robertson has won 9 of his last 10 matches against Mark Selby, but only one of those wins was in a multi-session match, so it would be interesting to see that matchup over 2 sessions again. I spoke about Shaun ideally needing a result or 2, and he has beaten Hawkins in the one and only multiple session match they've ever played in, and he may just want some revenge after the hammering he got from Judd last week too. And I do ultimately think the opening round match that I have the most interest in will be Ding against Williams, purely because both need to find some form from somewhere. There's been 2 previous meetings in multiple session matches between them, and they both have 1 win apiece in that regard, with Ding's being a comprehensive 13-3 win at the Crucible 9 years ago. Whatever happens though, I just cannot wait to binge watch snooker for the next 40 odd days until the beginning of May. This really is the best time of year to be a snooker fan, so make sure you enjoy it. I will return later in the week for my full breakdown of the World Championship qualifiers draw as soon as it's been finalised, and of course I will then return next Monday for my full review of how events unfold in Manchester as the penultimate tournament of the season reaches its conclusion.